This video is brought to you by True Tales of Buried Treasure, the largest collection of old treasure magazines in the West. On our website, you can search for individual treasure stories by region, or buy our original magazines themselves. To pay us a visit, please click on the link in the description. Enjoy. This particular wagon train was small, hardly fitting the usual image of a bustling caravan. With just 3 modest wagons and a crew composed entirely of Chinese laborers, the group was unique in several ways, most notably because they were transporting a significant stash of gold coins. The journey began as they departed the placer mines of California's Feather River country, setting out on the lesser-traveled Nobles Road. This route eventually merged with Lassen's Trail, a north-south route that had been popular during the gold rush years with Oregon-bound prospectors. The wagon train reached Honey Lake, a typical basin-like lake east of the Sierra Nevada, where they made their first rest stop after crossing the arid Smoke Creek Desert in central Nevada. That night, as they sat around their camp, they reflected on their decision to take this journey and the events that had brought them here. The group had been working together since the early 1860s, laboring along the Middle Fork and upper reaches of the American River. Unlike other miners who had abandoned these sites once the surface gold was gone, this group persevered. They dug deeper, built sluices and engineered ditches and wing dams to funnel water into untouched hillsides, carefully panning out every last trace of gold from the leftover tailings. Over the years, their determination paid off, allowing them to amass a respectable fortune, enough to fill 2 chests with gold dust and nuggets. Their destination was Tuscarora, a booming mining town in north-central Nevada, where a new silver vein had recently been discovered. Thousands had already flocked there, including a sizable Chinese community. Some of their friends and family who had already settled in Tuscarora had sent word of the town's promise, inviting the group to invest in their holdings or join in on the rich silver diggings. For these weary miners whose luck in California had waned, the chance at new prosperity sounded too good to pass up. With winter fast approaching, they knew they had to hurry to reach Tuscarora before the season's first harsh storms made travel impossible. The group considered 2 potential routes. One took them south through the Sacramento Valley and over the steep Sierra Nevada, a heavily traveled path that rose over 6,000 feet before descending into the Great Basin Desert. The other, less traveled route ran eastward and slightly north across northern Nevada, along Nobles Road, eventually connecting with the Applegate Cutoff in the Black Rock Desert. This latter road was mostly used by emigrants headed to Oregon who had veered off the westward Humboldt or Donner Trail near Winnemucca to take a more northerly route. With supplies packed and their decision made, they forged ahead, seeking a new beginning in Nevada's silver-rich hills. The Applegate Cutoff more than made up for any lack of hardship on the Donner Trail. It stretched over 100 miles of harsh, high desert terrain, where finding water was a gamble at best. Springs were rare, and travelers often had to dig to reach any moisture. Midway along this path lay the Black Rock Desert, an unending expanse of alkali flatlands, known for its desolation. Even for those who managed to endure the brutal environment, there remained the constant threat of attacks by Paiute Indians. Diaries from emigrants in the mid-1800s are filled with harrowing accounts of violence and loss from these encounters. Yet, the dangers faced by these travelers were not unlike the violence that Chinese immigrants endured in mining towns across the West during the early 1870s. As stories circulated about beatings and lynchings in towns like Truckee after the Central Pacific Railroad was completed in 1869, the Chinese had more to fear than the desert. When the railroad work ended, Chinese laborers, who had been vital in its construction, were left jobless. White workers resented them for taking jobs at lower wages, leading to growing hostility. In many towns, white residents were determined to drive out every Chinese worker. With tensions running high, the Chinese travelers knew better than to venture south through the more populated and hostile regions. They opted instead to head directly east, steering clear of areas where racial violence was common. Though accounts vary, the group likely consisted of no more than 8 or 10 men. They prepared well, buying sturdy wagons and strong mules. 2 wagons carried their precious cargo, chests filled with gold, and the third held supplies for the journey. Following Noble's Road, they set up their first camp at Honey Lake, located on the southeastern edge of the Smoke Creek Desert, where it meets the Black Rock Desert near Gerlach, Nevada, a place known as Mud Springs back then. After crossing Smoke Creek and entering Nevada by nightfall, the group stopped to discuss their route. They considered the shortest path to Tuscarora, which would take them east and slightly north in a near straight line. But that route would lead them through a desolate alkali wilderness, a barren stretch of dust with little chance of finding water. Some members voiced doubts, wondering if they would even be able to recognize the Applegate Cutoff when they reached it, somewhere beyond Mud Springs. They recalled hearing back in California how the Black Rock Desert was notorious for its relentless heat and dust storms that could rage for days. As dawn broke and the desert winds began to whip up blinding clouds of dust, even the most determined among them realized that pressing east would be a death sentence. They chose instead to turn south. Though the southern path was also a sagebrush-covered desert, it offered a reprieve in the form of Pyramid Lake, a desert oasis. They had enough provisions to reach the lake and then continue southeast to the Humboldt River, where they could join the Donner Trail and follow it almost all the way to their destination. The group turned south, and their journey toward Pyramid Lake was uneventful. As they traveled along the lake's western shore, they grew more confident in their choice of route. But near the lake's southern end, disaster struck. In the early hours of the morning, a renegade band of Paiute Indians attacked their camp. In the summer of 1933, an elderly trader who had spent his life in the area shared a story he claimed to have heard firsthand as a young boy. Before his death, he recounted the tale to a Nevada newspaper. There were 3 wagons and maybe 7 or 8 Chinamen camped on the west bank of Pyramid Lake. This was long ago. The Chinamen couldn't shoot straight, and they were frightened. The Paiutes wanted payment for trespassing on their lands, maybe a mule, some food, clothes, or a gun. The Paiutes didn't bother with councils or negotiations. They saw an opportunity to gain goods from these foreign trespassers. All night, they watched the Chinamen and finally revealed themselves from a distance at dawn. But instead of talking, the Chinamen ran to their wagons and started shooting. The Paiutes wanted to talk, but the Chinamen wouldn't stop firing, so the Paiutes shot back. By the end of an hour, every Chinaman was dead, while not a single Paiute was harmed. Inside the wagons, the Paiutes found a bounty: food, clothes, needles, and even mules and dynamite. They also discovered heavy boxes filled with China gold, each with handles for carrying. One box was so heavy that they threw handfuls of coins into the lake to lighten the load. Eventually, some of the Paiutes grew impatient, wanting to leave with their spoils. They took the remaining box of coins and placed it at the base of a cliff. Then they climbed up, dislodged rocks, and pushed them down over the box. For good measure, they broke off the edge of the cliff, burying the box and coins deep under the rubble. That was a long time ago, but I remember it clearly. I was very young then, but the box is still somewhere near Pyramid Lake. The only problem is, the Paiutes didn't mark the place. At the southern end of Pyramid Lake, near the Truckee River's entrance, lies the community of Nixon. In the summer of 1967, a bulldozer operator unearthed a hoard of gold coins valued at over $3,000. Many believed this was the lost Chinese gold, until it was found that some of the coins had dates as recent as 1917. Over the years prior to 1933, gold coins had occasionally surfaced along Pyramid Lake's shores. Since then, however, none have been found. Why? Possibly because Pyramid Lake's shoreline has receded by about 3 feet since the early 1930s. This means any coins that were buried in the lake's muddy areas now lie much farther from the current shoreline. Likewise, the cliff where the main hoard was supposedly buried would now be significantly further from the lake. A century of shifting sands and erosion has likely reduced the chances of uncovering these hidden treasures. Yet, the mystery and occasional discoveries, like those at Nixon, continue to make the area around Pyramid Lake a tempting spot for treasure hunters, each hoping to find that elusive lost hoard. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to read the original article or purchase the magazine from which it was taken, please check out our website, truetalesofburiedtreasure.com.